You want to know something scary?
Yeah, scare us. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Radically Well podcast. I'm your host, Rosie Acosta. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Rhonda Voskuhl.
Now, why is it that Alzheimer's disease, 2/3 are women? There's got to be a reason. Yeah. If we figure it out, we can change it.
Dr. Rhonda is a neurologist and researcher at UCLA, leading groundbreaking studies on sex differences in the brain and autoimmune diseases. She's a pioneer in women's health research.
We won't have estrogen for 1/3 of our lives. We know that estrogens are neuroprotective. And so loss of estrogen is bad for the brain.
And today we sit down with Dr. Rhonda to talk about the brain and menopause. Here's our interview. This was sort of the basis of why I decided to change my content, because I had gone to so many doctors and I just kept getting you're fine, everything's fine. And it was happening simultaneously while I was on a fertility journey, and I had gone through a couple of miscarriages, and the doctor just kept saying, like, keep trying, you know? Meanwhile, I was like having hot flashes and I was getting the brain fog and I was having all of these symptoms that I'd never had before. And, you know, being a meditation teacher, yoga teacher for 20 years, having all these tools, I was like, what is going on with me? Like, I feel like I do not know why I'm here, you know? And so going through that process helped me, you know, find doctors, which was tough, even at the beginning of 2024. You know, it feels like this conversation about perimenopause and menopause and women's health has really sort of, it's like the new frontier, right? But I know that the work has been happening for a long time.
Well, Oprah calls it the menopause revolution.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it's great. And your work, the work that you're doing is so incredible. And I have so many questions, right? And we could just jump right into it. But mainly, I think maybe if we could start with what happens to our brain during this process, like what happens to us as we age, and why. My big thing is like, why aren't we talking about this? You know,
that's true. That's right. But we are now. So
we are now.
We'll focus on forward thinking and correcting and forget the past. Well, not forget, but learn from the past, move forward. So, what happens to our brains during menopause is the question. It's, well, you can put it in the largest context. You know, aging is not good for any organ systems, especially the brain. And menopause particularly is not good. The reason is because we know that estrogens are neuroprotective. We know they protect the brain. We've known it forever. And so loss of estrogen that's protective is bad for the brain. So bad in what sense with respect to symptoms or brain imaging? With respect to symptoms, it primarily affects people's ability to have good, you know, finding the word, verbal memory. And you've got to do a lot of that. I've got to do a lot of that, actually. Many of us do, and even in our conversations. We need to be able to come up with the word. We need to have a good working memory. We need to basically, if we're talking and we get distracted, we can't be losing our train of thought. So these are some very discrete, focal, cognitive issues. What it's not is not IQ. Everybody's just as smart as they ever were. They can figure out things, etc. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time. That's called processing speed. So the cognitive domain specific. Again, not the whole cognitive 9 yards, if you know what I mean. They're still smart. I want to get that in there for women. Always have been, will be. But just these focal problems. That's probably one of the reasons they've been missed. The other things that when large, you know, universities do studies with respect to imaging, brain MRIs specifically, they actually find that, again, while the whole brain is not disrupted or atrophying, there are certain areas, particularly the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, these are areas, but the hippocampus is particularly important because that is affected early in Alzheimer's disease, we all know. I'm not saying that link necessarily, we can talk about that later, but I'm just saying there are areas of the brain that are affected with atrophy and loss of connectivity, and lo and behold, the areas that are affected in the brain on MRI are the areas that confer the same functions as verbal memory, train of thought, processing speed. You see where I'm going with this? So it's more than just complaining. And it's not global. So it's focal, it's specific, and it's more than just complaints. You can actually see things on MRI. So it needs to be addressed, and we need a neuroprotective drug targeting this, in my opinion. That's our quest.
I mean, that was what was really interesting to me as I was going through these symptoms and feeling, the brain fog and my memory and forgetting words.
words, names. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that was like probably the most shocking because I would stand there and think, how do I not know this word? Like I know the word, I can feel it in my body and I just couldn't get it out. And
for people like you, it's your job. It's not just your personal life and how you feel about yourself. And it's your job. And I've seen lawyers, I've seen teachers, I've seen people who they've got to have their words.
yes.
Just like that. It's got to be on the tip of their tongue and they're losing them. And it affects their confidence in their life in general.
Dr. Rhonda, why is it that the first thing that we get prescribed is birth control? Do you know?
Well, when you're diagnosed as early as 35, that's the first thing that people think of is we all know birth control pills usually, in the teens to menopause. And so that's the kind of thing you would think of when you see somebody coming in with these same symptoms and they're 51, they're not given birth control pills. So, and the HRTs, the traditional HRTs that have been around since the 1990s with the Women's Health Initiative studies, these old things like the estradiol patch, the Premarin, those have been around forever. And those are not used for birth control. So you've almost got this way of thinking about things. You've got the young ones who are, less than 50 and they can still actually, well, I don't know about 50, but 45 and early, they can still have children. And so you think about, do you want to have children or not? And so you give them a birth control pill because they may or may not at that age. Sometimes people are done with their families. But then when they get to be 35, you think, well, you got to think about birth control too, because this HRT is not designed for birth control. So the bottom line is when they're young, you're thinking about birth control pills because that's just naturally what they're always getting. And when they're older, such as, 50 or older, you start thinking about the estradiol patch and the Premarin, which we'll discuss a lot, the issues with those that have come up with the Women's Health Initiative studies and everybody quit using them and why and what can we do that's better. But that's why you would be given birth control pills even in early menopause because they're just so young. That's the way you think of 35-year-olds, birth control pills.
What would be a better way of dealing with somebody that's going through like an early menopause?
I hate to put a blanket term on a one-size-fits-all. The way that we do this at the UCLA Comprehensive Menopause Program and the way we do this with Cleopatra RX, which has the novel blister pack for menopausal women, is we weigh a lot of variables. So we say, well, what is your most important thing hot flashes and you don't care at all about your brain? Or is the most important thing preventing osteoporosis? Or is the most important thing you actually really prioritize your brain? And how bad are those symptoms? And so we basically take the person's priority, and if it's brain, I can speak a lot to that. So if it's brain, we give them the treatment that is tailored for brain, not necessarily estradiol patch, because it's been FDA approved for hot flashes. It's not been FDA approved for the brain. And what we've done is, I can talk more about it, but we've taken data from MS women, where we've given a different estrogen, a different type dose timing. In the blister pack, that's not birth control pills. It's actually for menopausal women. It's been designed for them, called Pearl Pack by Cleopatra RX. So it's Cleopatra because she was older and she was beautiful and she was smart. She's beautiful and smart. And so it's designed for menopausal women who are concerned about their brain. It also works for hot flashes. It's been given in Europe safely for 40 years. But the beauty of it is I've stayed away from the estrogen in the patch because of the risk for breast cancer. And this other one that I'm talking about binds weakly to the receptor in the breast. So we're trying to get selective efficacy in the brain and avoid toxicity of breast. That's the critical window, and that's what we're doing.
And so the toxicity portion, is that just with the regular estrogen patch that somebody might get prescribed?
Right. So the classic one that's being used extensively, it's FDA approved. It is the FDA approved hormone treatment. It's called Estradiol, and there's Premarin that's been around forever too. They've been around forever. Everybody was on those things back in the 80s. Some women were getting breast cancer. They started looking at those rates, and there was a publication, many publications where the trials were stopped because there was an increased risk of breast cancer. And the reason would be because they have estradiol in them. They bind strongly to estrogen receptor alpha in the breast, and that is the receptor that women who have breast cancer, they take tamoxifen to block that stimulation. So now the pendulum is swinging back, and women are saying, well, maybe if you're really young and you only take it for a low dose and for a short period of time, just for the hot flashes, it'll be okay. It probably is. The FDA is now talking about whether we could basically use it, again, at a low dose for a relatively short period of time, and it won't increase breast cancer that much, particularly if you're under 60. That's where it's still got a black box on it. But that's where the discussion is. For me, as a neuroscientist and a neurologist who's concerned about the brain, I know this is not going to be a quick, it's not like an antibiotic treatment for an infection. It's not like stopping bleeding. This is a long-term thing. Fortunately, brain degeneration, cognitive issues, brain decline is a long, long haul. And this is not, and it's going to be as people age, actually. So it's not going to be a quick thing for a few years or even 5 years as somebody who's, for example, 48 to 52, and then they just stop it. Because then what? Women will be, the perimenopause is kind of the worst because the hot flashes are really bad.
Yeah.
And it gets everybody's attention and it's all new. And I'm not saying that having hot flashes and night sweats and poor sleep, I'm not saying that's not bad for cognition. I think it is. But I'm saying it's more than that. Because even in women, they don't have that many hot flashes. They have cognitive issues. Many of them do. Some of them have hot flashes and they go away on their own. They do dissipate over 5 to 7 years. They dissipate on their own gradually. They still have cognitive issues and they will worsen as they age. We won't have estrogen for a third of our lives, at least a third. We usually live to 80, 85. Mean age for menopause is actually 51.5. And so most people are going to go from about 50 to 80s with no estrogen. And when it fluctuates, that initial perimenopause, that gives the hot flashes and all the concerns and everything. That's bad. And that's fine to treat that temporarily with estradiol if people want to. It's not been proven to affect the brain, but that's fine if that's not their priority. Yeah. And it may help with cognition to some degree just because they sleep better. But I'm again, it's just coming from as a neurologist and trying to treat these very real, pathologies and MRI changes. There are changes that occur in the brain that I want to stop. And it's not just, getting better sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
they're not
totally.
mutually exclusive. Good, treat that. But I can just tell you there are a lot of women who don't have hot flashes and they have cognitive issues.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you speak about this before, that even with HRT, and if you are taking progesterone and estrogen, that's still not doing anything to protect what's happening to your brain.
That's true when you take the estradiol patch and Permin for sure. There's no evidence that it's neuroprotective. I honestly think, based on my research at UCLA, it's NIH funded, I do think there are estrogen receptor alpha receptors in the brain. I think they could confer some protection. I don't know, because I never wanted to work on that because I knew we're never going to be able to do this in the long run. Why go there? There's another receptor sitting there called estrogen receptor beta that I want to use an estrogen that binds that one and doesn't bind strongly to alpha. And that's what we've done, because I just want to do things that I know will be tolerable after putting, you'll put 10 or 15 years into this, developing something. And I don't want to be told yet again, just like the estradiol patch, just like the Premrins, that, you can only take it for a few years because we're worried about, breast cancer and clotting and cardiovascular issues. That's the beauty. Estriol, the one I'm using, has been used in Europe for 40 years for hot flashes. Right?
Why are we so behind?
Hey, friends. Have you been struggling with mood swings? Like getting really irritated by the simplest things? Personally, every time I watch my husband put a dish in the dishwasher, it just inexplicably drives me crazy, which is not normal for me. I'm just curious, do you feel like your hormones could be out of whack? Like you haven't been sleeping well, been stressing a lot, craving foods you are not used to craving as much, or even your skin, your hair, and your muscles, do they feel different? Well, let's talk about a game-changing mineral that can help you feel your best: magnesium. Magnesium is an absolute must for keeping your hormones balanced and your body functioning optimally. But here's the thing, most of us aren't getting nearly enough from our diets alone. And when you're deficient in this vital mineral, it can throw your entire system out of sync. In addition to hundreds of other chemical reactions, magnesium also plays a vital role in hormonal balance, glucose metabolism, and managing symptoms across different stages of life. This makes magnesium supplementation a great support for all ages. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about the Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. This unique formula contains 7 different forms of highly bioavailable magnesium, including magnesium orotate, which is amazing for metabolic and hormonal health. It can also support your hormonal health by supporting sleep, digestive health, stress management. So nourish your brain and body with Magnesium Breakthrough now. For an exclusive offer, go to www biomebreakthrough.com/radically loved and use promo code radically loved during checkout to save 15%. If you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed. Check it out at www.biomebreakthrough.com/radically loved.
I don't know. It's a larger question probably for another day. There are a lot of things I could say. I am at UCLA and my NIH grant for $7 million is suspended. So, but we won't go there. And by the way, the NIH funding is where all of this new treatment is based. It's all based on really $50 million over the 2 decades that I've worked on MS and then aging and now early Alzheimer's models. It's based on NIH funding. And that is the foundation for everything we've done with the company. The company licensed patents from UCLA that I'm the inventor on. So I do want to say that NIH funding is extremely important if you want to do really basic science and figure things out like I want to in the brain. And actually, this needs to be done in heart. It needs to be done in other organ systems affected by menopause. Each one of these systems, in my opinion, whether it be even skin and elasticity, or whether it's heart, or whether it's bone, it needs to be very clearly determined, just like we've done in brain, which receptors mediate benefit. And then like any pharmaceutical company, I'm not one, but I do work at a university that's pretty good at developing things. You target the one for efficacy and you avoid those other ones that can cause toxicities. This is 101, pharmaceutical development 101. Bind something that gives efficacy, minimize off-target side effects. And that's quite simply what we're doing with the brain. And I think as a comprehensive menopause program faculty person, I think this should be done in all organ systems. We need to be sitting there and saying, I don't know for sure that what estriol's effect is on the cardiovascular. Actually, alpha and beta differentially affect the cardiovascular system. I don't know that it has any bad effects in the cardiovascular. If you read the literature on that, it's not my field. I know a little bit I am a physician. I can read the papers, but it needs to be done on every one of them. You know what I mean? You can imagine a world where we actually knew this is your priority. This is the receptor that mediates the good and the bad things. And we're going to go for that one in you. And you're going to go for that one in you. If menopause could catch up to the rest of these diseases, that's where we would be.
Yeah. And just for the people that don't know what NH is.
Oh, National Institutes of Health.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's extremely important for funding these basic findings. I mean, my approach has been, I've coined the term, it's not even bench to bedside, because I don't want to, I actually personally, some people do, I don't want to do basic research that's got no relevance to people and it's going to be put in a book somewhere that's all the reason is. I don't do that. I actually it's bedside to bench to bedside. It's not bench. It doesn't start at the laboratory bench. It starts with people. And MS affects women more. It gets worse with menopause. Alzheimer's affects women more. Women with aging have cognitive issues. The question is why? Right? And it could be there's an X chromosome gene that's bad. It could be that there's an estrogen that is good. It's good for a while, but when you start to lose it, that's a problem. And so we've worked on both of those. And we do it through NIH grants. So we get a clinical finding, the bedside to bench to bedside. Bedside is the clinical observations, the things we all know. We all know they're important. We do. Why is it that Alzheimer's disease, 2/3 are women? There's got to be a reason. If we figure it out, we can change it. So that's a clinical observation. We then go to the lab and we do that NIH-funded research and we figure it out. And we say, it's because this receptor has gone off because menopause is not binding estrogen receptor beta in the brain. I've done that. And we find that out. So what do we do then? We say, go back to the bedside. Bedside to bench to bedside. Let's go back out to the bedside. Let's devise a clinical trial, let's do clinical studies, and let's see if we can bind ER beta through a treatment that we know is safe in Europe, will it help? And we do that. You see, when you take out all that NIH funding, you're not going to have new findings to pursue with new treatments. You're not going to have them anymore. And that's the foundation for what Cleopatra RX has done when they made Pearl Pack. It is based on the neuroscience of the brain, bedside to bench to bedside. Without NIH funding, we wouldn't have $50 million put into this ahead of time that NIH put in.
It's hard to not feel discouraged hearing things like getting research not funded, especially when
it's going to change. It's not going to go on forever. We have to get through the rough spots, and I think the pendulum always swings, and I think there's no way this can hold because we had nothing to do with the things that were involved at all. We were just in our labs and in our clinics trying to see patients and find treatments for them. That's all we were doing. And so we did nothing wrong. And so to have this happen, it can't stand. I guess I believe in justice and I believe in I believe that the right things will happen. I just think it'll take a little time. We just have to get over this bump. So, we'll talk to philanthropic donors at UCLA. We'll do what we can, and I'm going to make it through. People will make it through, and it'll be okay. We just have to get through the next few years or so.
Yeah. I'm hopeful for us to be able to get there, because it's research that is absolutely needed. And
all diseases.
Yeah.
Cancer, Alzheimer's, stroke, you name it.
Yeah. I have a question about, for women that are going through this and maybe they're just learning about brain health and cognition now, because I feel like we don't learn about this until we get to that point. All my friends that are the same age as I am, and I'm 42, none of them are dealing with this. None of them are thinking about this.
The reason that happened, there's been other people, not me, looking at that, and they're addressing it. But what they're saying is that when they look back at the training for GYNs would be also internists know this stuff, but they get even less training. But even the GYNs in the medical schools were getting 8 hours on menopause. Can you imagine a GYN? I mean, give me a break. It's estrogen. Oh, and it does involve breast, kind of a GYN thing. I get it. It's not really, but kind of a little bit. We do talk to our GYNs and ask them to order mammograms. Well, I'm just saying. And then the other thing with menopause is it causes the genitourinary syndrome, which is vaginal dryness and urinary lining dryness and issues. So those linings are important to stay young, to make secretions, to, move things along. And when you go through menopause, the cells become a little bit older, aging of that genitourinary symptom, let's put it mildly. And then you have vaginal dryness. You have, sometimes people get UTIs more frequently. So these are incontinence. These are issues that our GYNs should definitely be learning about, right? I mean, and there's 8 hours spent on menopause. And they don't even talk about the brain, of course. And neurologists don't talk at all about menopause. So you've got a problem here. There's a gap. So even within each discipline, they're not talking about cognition and menopause. GYNs aren't talking about menopause enough. They're not being taught enough about it in school, medical school. And that's being changed because there's some ideas that they are going to change. They're going to now increase the education for menopause. And I can just tell you the neurologists are not thinking about menopause and the cognitive issues. They're just not. I've been in this all my life, the neurology, and there's no way they're thinking about the effect of loss of neuroprotective estrogen and how that can affect their brain.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the clinical psychology program at Pepperdine right now.
Oh, that's great.
And even in that system, where's the conversation about what's happening to the brain, depression? Like, we're just so quick to prescribe antidepressants.
That's exactly right. Because the other thing about menopause is it's thought estrogens are good for mood, and people can have depression. I mean, they can have anxiety, kind of an anxious depression is what it is. There's some evidence, some papers actually that are not mine, but I respect them. And I see these patients every week coming in with menopause, and they will have an increase in anxiety and depression. Some of them will say they think they get ADHD for the first time, or they thought they had it and now it's getting worse. And, estrogens are known to be good for mood. And so this is another area that really needs to be studied. Really, it does, because to just put somebody on antidepressant, that's not necessarily fixing the problem. If the problem is low estrogen, then you need to fix that and not just kind of mask it with some other things. But I don't want to say too much about that because it's not my field to treat anxiety and depression. But I will say that it definitely happens with menopause. It can happen. And the reason why I know it happens, there's another clinical caveat. When you're pregnant, what happens is you're making more and more and more estradiol, which is of the menstrual cycles, progesterone. Then you make a new estrogen called estriol, which is the one I love because it does bind estrogen receptor alpha in the breast. We're using it in Pearl Pack. But what happens when you deliver? Well, those estradiols and progesterones crash, and the estriol's completely gone because you've gone from not having it to the fetus makes it. It gets very high. And MS patients get better and better and better. They have no relapses. They have neuroprotection. When they, or even healthy women, deliver the baby, those hormones crash. And what do they have? Within a few months, they have postpartum depression. The MS patients have relapses and worsening. So estrogens are high, they do great. Estrogens are low, they do bad for the brain. It's really not complicated. It's all I do is I just look at trends in real life and say, hey, it's up, it's good, it's down, it's bad, let's replace it. That's it.
And that's not what happens. I had a friend that went through it and the first thing she got was an antidepressant.
Exactly.
And I'm like, how is, people that are on antidepressants. Like I'm not saying
I'm not
anything.
either.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah. We're
either.
not. We're not.
We're not.
We're not. But all I'm saying is that what Dr. Rhonda is saying is so it begs a bigger conversation and a bigger question of like, this makes sense.
It makes sense.
Total sense.
And they're not mutually exclusive either, because
Right.
you can make an argument that they're going to need antidepressants to get through the days and to get through those things. That's not, but are they treating the root cause?
Right.
The root cause was they lost estrogen in post. They had it very high. That probably could have changed the receptor expressions and how the response. It's not, you have something really high and you yank it away all of a sudden. That can be not good. I don't want to explain the details because it's probably kind of boring, but you can be a real.
You can explain it to me because I'm a nerd.
Well, I'm just saying, if you have a hormone very, very high for a long time, you can imagine you could affect the receptor. You could downregulate the reception. It's like, this is really high. The body is really smart at adjusting and protecting itself. And there are a lot of things that could happen in a very high hormone system that's temporary during pregnancy, for example. And then when you yank it away completely, you can imagine you're going to trough out. That's the postpartum period. And again, what happens? MS gets worse, that people have anxiety and depression. And there's no problem with having a symptomatic treatment to help the anxiety, to help the depression, but you also need to treat the root cause of it. And that was, you lost estrogen abruptly and dramatically. We have thought about giving estriol, the pregnancy estrogen. I'll just say this to get off the menopause a little bit, but we want to give estriol for menopausal women with MS, of course, because we know their disabilities worsen with menopause. And so, of course, we want to give estrogen. We have to give a safe one. We can't give something that can only be taken for a few years, and they're a little bit old. They're menopausal, so they're a little bit older. They could be 55 and 60, 62, 63. We have to think about, I don't love estradiol. It's not been worked up for brain protection. It's got these off-target effects on breasts. So we would use estriol because we know it can be safe and it's been shown to be neuroprotective. So I obviously want to take estriol to menopausal women with decline during menopause, the MS women, and then the other women treat them as well for their cognitive issues. Another thing you can make an argument for that I haven't done, but it's totally logical, would be to treat postpartum women with this Pearl Pack and estriol. I haven't done it, but let's face it, that the estrogen of pregnancy, estriol, is unique to pregnancy. It goes very, very high. The MS women do great. They lose it. They get postpartum depression. And if you could give that estriol postpartum and keep it up for a while, and then at least gradually decrease it postpartum, that might be a way to prevent postpartum depression. That's just an idea. No proof. I'm just saying the logic tree is it's very high. You take it away. They have postpartum depression. Could you continue it a little, like for 3 to 6 months to a year, and slowly decrease it and get them back to their equilibrium before they were pregnant? Yeah. And you may need some antidepressants too, but I'm trying to treat the root cause of postpartum depression. I'm not doing it. I'm talking about the root cause of postpartum depression. Right now, I'm focused on menopausal women who lose their estrogen, and we're trying to treat them.
Can you tell us the difference between estradiol and estriol?
Estriol.
Yeah.
Well, they're a different chemical compound. And they're not a secret. So estriol is not a unique compound that's been made by a chemist in a lab and has never been given. It's been given for 40 years. It's natural pregnancy. We know what the compound structure is of estriol. We also know the compound structure of estradiol. They have the same backbone. They have some different groups on the site. It's a chemical compound, an organic compound with a known structure. So they're just different. And because they're different, they bind to receptors differently because parts of the compound bind to the receptor this way or that way. So estradiol and estriol, they can be synergistic in some tissues and cells. They can be antagonistic in others. See what I mean? So for example, when you give something that's known in mice, I'll just give mice as an example because you can really figure it out in a mouse. That's why we go to the bench, because you can figure it out. When you give estradiol, it really causes a robust proliferation of the uterine endometrium. It gets thicker and thicker and thicker. That's why our periods we have progesterone. So you slough it off and the lining's thin again. So the lining goes to only menstrual cycles. It's estradiol. It's not estriol. It's progesterone. Progesterone's only there for 2 weeks out of every 4 week cycle because the first 2 weeks are the follicular phase where you're making estrogen. The uterine lining is getting thicker, 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 thicker. And then at 2 weeks, you ovulate. Temperature goes up a little bit, so you kind of know. And then you don't get pregnant. If you do, it's good because the lining's thick and it's ready to support that, feed the developing egg. If you don't, then you can't have persistent continued increased thickening. So progesterone naturally comes on and it causes that lining to get thinner and thinner and slough off. And then you bleed and then it all starts all over. So the uterine lining is getting thicker, 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 thinner with the progesterone, right? So the progesterone counters it. That's why people can't take unopposed estrogens, because it will cause persistent, continuous, forever increase. You've got to take a progesterone if you have a uterus to make the lining thin again. But that's okay. It's all birth control pills, HRT, it's always done. With estrogen receptor alpha and beta, it's really interesting because alpha is the one that's driving that proliferation. It's really drive, okay? And so that's why they've really got to take a progesterone. It's usually fine. Some might need a little higher. It depends on if they have breakthrough bleeding or not. And that's fine. The GYNs know this really well. They know how to monitor estrogen, progesterone, the lining thickness. They do ultrasounds to see how thick it is. They have some bleeding. They'll do a little scraping biopsy. And they know how to manage that. With estriol, it binds to estrogen receptor alpha weekly. I didn't say not at all. It's week, and mostly ER beta. That's what I said. But it's not a pure ER beta ligand where it only binds beta and none for alpha, because that would be something in a lab that's in a mouse, and I have patents on those too, but they've never been given to people. Sure, that may be a next generation estriol, but we have estriol that binds mainly to ER beta, but it also a little bit to alpha, okay? So we use that because of the huge safety record for 40 years. So when you talk about the uterine lining, it causes less of that thickening because it binds estrogen receptor alpha weekly. It causes less, but we still give a progesterone with it, because we're not going to have any unopposed estrogen effect at all, right? I can just tell you, in mice, if you do a pure ER alpha stimulation, the uterine lining will get very thick. If you give pure ER beta, it won't get thick. And if you give alpha with beta, beta will counter the thickness of the alpha. So the point is they can be antagonistic or synergistic, depending on the organ system. Breast cancer has different cells in it. This is getting really too complicated, but you've really got to think about alpha versus beta and make sure they're in a balance. And you've also got to think about the alpha versus the progesterone. The thing I love about the Pearl Pack by Cleopatra RX is that we can actually use a low dose progesterone. And the reason we can is because we know that the estriol doesn't bind alpha that strongly in the uterus, and the lining won't get that thick. It will to some degree. We'll still give progesterone just to be safe. We'll just do it. But we can keep it at 100 milligrams, not 200. The other thing that is known as a neurologist is you've got to give the progesterone at night, because the progesterone makes you sleepy. And so what we do with our blister pack, you've got women who actually have memory problems. And so it's almost impossible to tell them, take this estrogen is different than the one you're used to. Take this progesterone, take this in the morning, take this at night, and they will forget. And actually, that we've seen when you don't give it in a blister pack and you give them 2 bottles and tell them, they're like, what did you say? Did you take this a day? And sometimes I will even give the progesterone only 2 weeks out of every 4-week cycle, because that's actually all you need to be physiologic with menstrual cycles. Progesterone is there only for 2 weeks out of every 4-week cycle. It's called cyclic progesterone. I actually like that because progesterone's a little bit dulling. It's a little bit makes them drowsy. Not great for the brain. I love the brain. So there you go.
Yeah.
So
we love the brain.
We love the brain. And so we want to minimize anything dampening brain function. So we give the progesterone at the lowest dose. We give it at night, and I even give it 2 weeks out of every 4-week cycle. And I can definitely get away with it because we're giving estriol, and it doesn't stimulate the uterus that much. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So tell me about.
But that's why we need a blister pack.
Yes.
Because you talk about
what is a blister pack? Tell us.
A blister pack is anytime you just have a pack and you load it with. We have a national compounding pharmacy, so it's not all kinds of compounding pharmacies and all these places that are not uniformly doing a protocol. And I've seen them basically give out bottles. They give estradiol instead of estriol sometimes. And the doses are completely not a dose equivalence. And these women get bottles and they'll take the progesterone. They say, I'll just take them both in the morning. I'm like, no, don't take them both in the morning, because the progesterone's going to make you sleepy, and then you're going to be, it's hard enough having menopause. So they'll take them wrong. The instructions are wrong. And so what we've done with Cleopatra is we've got a national compounding pharmacy protocol. We've got 2 major compounding pharmacies. One's East Coast, one's West Coast. They can ship it across state lines to all 50 states. And I know this gets done right, and that women can take it because it's a blister pack, and it says AM, PM. AM is estriol. PM is progesterone. Unless the 2 weeks I'm not giving progesterone at all because they're getting drowsiness side effects, then I will say AM's estriol, and there's going to be a placebo pill as a spacer to keep track of it. Think about the birth control pills from the old days, from the younger days. That's right. But what they were doing, they were doing it in a blister pack, so you remember to take it every day. What they were also doing, I don't know if people know this, but they were changing by the week. Triphasics. What does triphasics mean? It's 3 phases. The triphasics are changing the amount of the estradiol and the progesterone each week to mimic the menstrual cycle. That's what they're doing. They're putting them in the same pill. which you could do that. We could do that too, whatever. There's pharmacologic reasons to do or not do that. But those birth control pills were always changing the estradiol and the progesterone during the menstrual cycle to recapitulate things and to make it to where you don't ovulate, actually. That's what they were doing. So you don't get pregnant, right?
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, like I was wanting to get pregnant and it didn't happen. I mean, that's a separate story, but
the blister packs are important because you're trying to manipulate. You see what I'm trying? You're trying to manipulate two hormones over the days of the month and to make it physiologic. And now we actually need a separation between AM and PM for cognition because estriol is great. It makes them want to get up and work. And the progesterone make them a little sleepier, right?
Yeah. That makes so much sense to me. Like,
Good.
It's just like common
it's
sense.
not that hard. It's just kind of common sense, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not what the general population. That's not what we're being told. Or
But we're changing that right now.
Yeah, we are. We're changing it right now.
And Oprah's changing it. Everybody's changing it. There you go.
Yeah, and I'm excited, and I think it's so important. I'm so excited about Cleopatra RX.
Yeah.
Like, so how can we get it? What's the protocol here? Do we have to have?
You can just go to the website. It's
Okay.
cleopatrarx.com. We've got physicians throughout all 50 states, nurses. We have physicians. We have nurses who follow up with you. Did you get it? Are you taking it? How are you taking it? Are you taking? We basically say, are you taking that in the morning? Make sure it's right, even though it's a blister pack, because they have memory problems. You're dealing with. It's not that bad, but it is those subtle things, right? And then they'll be busy. They'll be ADHD. They'll be running all over the place, and they'll forget. And so we have follow up. We also give them our brain fog questions, 6 questions on how they're doing with respect to verbal memory, processing speed, train of thought. We give it to them at month 0, and we give it again at month 12, 24. We're going to get this data, not just for research, but to tell them, well, you actually answered those questions like this at month 0, and now you're answering them like this. And we've got early data showing that they're getting better. So that's really cool. At 12 months, but I tell you, it takes 12 months because with the MS patients, I saw the same thing. So we've got publications in MS because I've done that for so many years. It's all been done, but 3 papers. And what happens is, at 6 months, they start to see a little bit of improvement. It's at 12 months that they had improvement in cognitive processing speed, the MS patients. It's at 12 months they saw reductions in cerebral cortex, regional atrophy in the brain. And it was at 12 months we saw benefits on a blood marker of neurodegeneration. It took 12 months. And so I also tell these women, when you start Cleopatra RX, it's 12 months. This isn't fast. And I'm glad neurodegeneration is not fast. Who wants it to be fast? But you're doing something for the long term to try to protect your brain. And the beauty of this, though, the real cool thing is, and this is what got me onto this, with the MS, I was shocked. I thought, well, MS patients have cognitive issues, mostly processing speed. And usually, based on the Alzheimer's literature, like all those drugs do, is they slower the rate of decline. So instead of going like this, they're going like this. They don't work I'm just saying we need better Alzheimer's drugs. And we all know that now. Everybody's doing mild cognitive impairment, which is before that. But when you just basically slow the rate of decline from a steep slope down to a shallower slope down, that's not so good. If family members know what I'm talking about when they've seen people with Alzheimer's disease, that's not good enough. It's also not good enough for MS. They don't have Alzheimer's, but they have processing speed issues. And it's not good enough to just make their processing speed problem will not get as bad. It takes more years than less to do bad. That's not good enough. And so, the beauty of this estrogen, estriol in Pearl Pack that we're doing for menopause women right now is when we gave this estrogen to MS women, we didn't just see that we made their rate of decline less, looking at month 0 to month 12, to where it was shallower down. They improved. That's cool. And I, as a scientist, I'm like, whoa, that means we're not just blocking something bad. We're causing repair. We're doing something good. And so I did about 10 years of research on that and found out what that is. And so what estriol is doing, it's binding ER beta in the brain, which I said before, but specifically what it's doing to cause repair, the repair is not that complicated. I'm a brain cell. I have extensions like this. They go out to you. This is my cell body. This is my axon. This is my synapses. I make connections. Put your hand up here. So then when it makes a neurotransmitter, it goes across here in the signal. I get stimulated like, oh, firing, need to go do something, move my leg or whatever it is, or think of a thought. Electrical conduction goes down here, goes down, and it goes, chemicals go across here, and then you get it, right? And so the nerves in your brain communicate with each other all the way, spinal cord to brain. That's the way they communicate. What happens in disease is you can lose this sheath, this myelin, and that makes it slow. And then the real bad thing is these things start to retract. You lose synapses. And this is the big case really with Alzheimer's and aging, you have synaptic loss. And if you don't have this, the wire degrades. If you lose this, it all goes down together. It's all coordinated. And so what the estrogen does is it causes not only this to come back, called remyelination. That's huge for MS. Remyelination. Not just decreasing demyelination, causing remyelination. Not just making the stripping off slower. It's basically causing more to be put on, repair. That's cool. Wow. The other thing is it causes synaptic plasticity. Synaptic means more synapses are made. So they've retracted, they're like this with age. And then when they take estriol, synaptic plasticity, they make new ones. And that's why they get better. And there's a precedent for making new ones. There's a precedent for making myelin. So how are we ever going to find anything to cause remyelination and increase synapses? How are we ever going to find that? Well, I'll tell you how we find it. It happens in what? Babies, children. They lay down myelin. They continue to lay it down in the first few years after they're born, and they make all kinds of synapses. And so I think estriol, why it works? Why did I get that lucky? Because estriol is the estrogen of pregnancy. It's the best thing ever for a developing brain, to make myelin and to make synapses. We're taking something that's known to be reparative of the brain that occurs during brain development, and we're going to give that to old people and say, can we make you repair? See what I mean? You basically recapitulate some reparative situation. It happens to be as a baby. We don't have to accept that the old brains can't make new synapses. They actually can. It's all been done as a baby. So just give them something that they've been exposed to as a baby. And that's estriol, because the mother makes very high levels of estriol and the baby's exposed to it. I think it was evolutionarily selected for. I think mothers that made high estriol had babies that survived, because any kind of insult to the fetus, it's bad. And that's a fact. But if you had something that would protect the baby, they'll be more likely to be born, more likely to perpetuate their genes. Yeah. That's evolutionarily, that's selection bias. The other thing estriol does, just so you know, and it's related, estriol is anti-inflammatory, estriol. So, and that's why it works so well in MS too. MS is an inflammatory and neurodegenerative disease, and it primarily affects women 3-to-1. So the treatments for MS, they're all anti-inflammatory, and now we neuroprotective ones, and we don't have any, but mine is one we should be thinking about, and I'm working on it, of course. But what's interesting about that is pregnant women do so well when they're pregnant. Why? Because estriol is known to be both anti-inflammatory for their peripheral blood. We've done that work too. We did it 15 years ago. It's published. Estriol is anti-inflammatory. Their immune system is dampened a little bit. For MS women, that's a good thing because it's overactive and it causes repair. So estriol is anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective. Pregnancy is anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective. Estriol is recapitulating pregnancy for its anti-inflammatory and neuroprotectives. Do you know why they want women to have a little bit of anti-inflammatory? Because the fetus is actually a foreign graft. It's got half the father's genes on it, and it would be rejected like a foreign tissue. Right? It's half foreign. Half of it's mother's, and you won't reject yourself, but the other half is the father's. And so what the mother's body does is it develops a way to adjust the immune system during pregnancy so it won't reject that baby. The baby's foreign, but it's got to survive, right? And so what the body's natural system does is it has something that's a little bit anti-inflammatory for that period. And there's evidence that estriol does that as well. And estriol is very high during pregnancy. So think about this. The best thing for a pregnancy is to shift away from these strong immune responses that women usually have. Too strong. Actually, autoimmunity is more often the case in women, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, MS. They affect women more. So we know women have very strong immune systems. That's got to be dampened temporarily during pregnancy by something physiologic that's anti-inflammatory. That's estriol. But what's also really, and so the baby can survive, right? The other thing that's really good for the baby is to have something that's neuroprotective, because the brain's trying to develop. And if there's anything that comes along, like she falls, she gets an infection, whatever, if you have a little damage, we got to recover, we got to repair, right? It's naturally trying to make synapses. If anything happens, it wants to be able to repair. So that's why pregnancy is good for MS, because pregnancy is both anti-inflammatory, they have too much inflammation, and as neuroprotective, they need neuroprotection. And estriol there's a tremendous amount of evidence that estriol recapitulates those pregnancy effects. Oh my God. So for women who are aging Aging is primarily neurodegenerative, but there are immune cells in the brain. It's not like the peripheral immune system is activated. It's not. I'm not saying that. Aging menopausal women when they're 55 don't have MS. I'm not saying they do. But what I'm saying, during aging, they do have immune cells that are more inflamed. Aging causes resident immune cells in the brain to become more activated. And actually, I did this with you. We can do this thing again. So what happens during aging is you lose the conduction, you retract the synapses. Part of that's because you have inflammatory cells resident to the brain, not coming in from the blood like MS. But both MS and aging have these cells that are called microglia and astrocytes. These surrounding cells regulate inflammation. They become activated with aging. And that plays a role in these synapses pulling back and not working. And so what estriol does, it binds to these cells. It's anti-inflammatory for those cells in the brain too. So it's anti-inflammatory. It takes that inflammation away. It's holding back the repair, takes that away. And it also causes the repair to the myelin to be made. So it takes away the bad things, which is inflammation, and it restores reparative things. It's anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective. Estrogen, estriol. That's why it works in MS, and that's why it works in aging. Can it work in Alzheimer's? Yeah, based on this, it certainly can, because Alzheimer's has even more inflammation and more neurodegeneration, of course.
It's so interesting because I love the brain so much.
Yeah.
I watch videos on. I'm like super into.
Most
I'm
people
like,
hate it when I talk
look
about
at my
that
brain
stuff.
model over there. Like I'm.
That's
just,
right. I love that. I can show you the areas of the brain that are affected during menopause. You want me to show you?
Yes.
So what happens with menopause is with years of no estrogen treatment, and they're having these cognitive symptoms, which I said, their cognitive symptoms are not from all over the brain. They're from certain parts of the brain. Parts are related to memory, verbal memory, names, train of thought. These things occur. What's known to be affected in the brain during menopause is hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, these areas, here and here. So what happens with menopausal women, they undergo atrophy and their connectivity is less on MRI after years of menopause with no estrogen treatment targeting it. And so again, it's not the whole brain. Did the whole brain atrophy? No, it didn't. I didn't say that it did, because these areas will get diluted out. These other areas didn't atrophy, but these did. And so if you do the whole brain atrophy, it's not going to be substantially reduced. But when you look at the hippocampus, it is the prefrontal cortex. And then you go further, not just atrophy, but connectivity. And lo and behold, these areas are involved with those cognitive symptoms. You want to know something scary?
Yeah. Scare us.
Where does Alzheimer's start? It doesn't uniformly hit the brain. Alzheimer's starts in one part of the brain. It doesn't uniformly just hit it equally all over the place. It just doesn't do that. Where does Alzheimer's start? What part of the brain? And then it spreads. It does spread all over. Of course, when you've got Alzheimer's, it's all over. Atrophy, connectivity, everything's messed up. Where does it start?
Maybe the prefrontal cortex?
It starts in the hippocampus. And there's a lot of estrogen receptors there. And this is what's affected during menopausal women with cognitive issues. So this is what I want to say about Alzheimer's. So everything I've said is just a fact. I'm going to say something that's not a fact. It's a hypothesis. There's a difference, but I'm an academic. That's what I do.
Yeah,
I can make hypotheses. That's my fun part of my job. I got a lot of fun parts of my job, but that's a good one. Alzheimer's is too late to treat. That's why all the drug companies are going to preventative. And what is that? It's called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. That's where all the drug companies are, and that's where they should be. It was actually, NIH started talking about this, and I really got onto this too. What's even earlier than mild cognitive impairment? So you've got Alzheimer's disease. It's too late. There's too much damage. But you go into mild cognitive impairment is 10 years before Alzheimer's disease. So that's where all the trials are, and that's where they should be, right? If you want them to work. What's even earlier than mild cognitive impairment? What's 10 years before mild cognitive impairment? Alzheimer's is 2/3 women. It's menopausal women with cognitive issues. And this starts with cognitive issues referable to hippocampus. And on imaging, you see early changes in hippocampus. Am I saying that menopause cognition issues cause MCI and AD? I'm not saying that, because that hasn't been proven. But I'm also saying they've not done those, and people will say they're not associated, and they should alleviate people's concern. It doesn't necessarily lead to that. It can depend on whether you've got an APOL4 genotype, your family history, a lot of things like that. It can depend on a lot of things. But I'm just saying, I'm concerned by the obvious logic that it's mostly women. You want to go to MCI. What's earlier? You want to go earlier than that. And you've got these women that are having cognitive issues referable to the hippocampus because they've lost neuroprotective estrogen with menopause, right? That's a concern to me. Do I know that treating this, the only way you'll ever know, and right now the UK and the UK Biobank is doing studies, but right now they've only got very early data. What you've got to do, you've got to have women, to answer that question, there's two things that have to be done. The first thing is you have to do a longitudinal correlation over about 20 years to see whether having menopausal cognitive issues, can't remember the word, brain fog, right? No treatment with estrogen, or the right one that targets the brain, which is what we do. I'm just saying. You have to know whether that situation of being prolonged exposure to having no estrogen for decades, does that or does that not correlate with getting MCI and AD 10 to 20 years later? And when you do this, you can't look at whole brain dementia and you can't look at whole brain atrophy because that's not what we're even talking about. We're talking about you would have to do formal testing of these cognitive regions. And at the same time, you'd have to do MRI looking at hippocampus and frontal cortex, right? And then you'd have to see what are they and how do they track over 20 years. Right now, the UK Biobank is looking at those things, but they've only got a few years of data. So we'll find out eventually whether this does have a higher correlation with developing that later. We're going to find that out. But you know what? Even then, and my second point, it still won't be causal. Because just because there's an association, even longitudinal association, when you do this, years later it does that, that's a longitudinal association. A correlation, a cross-sectional correlation is what I do now correlates with what I have now. A longitudinal correlation is what I do now affects what I do later. This is a longitudinal correlation. What I do now, does it affect what my brain's going to be like later? That's going to take 20 years for this question about cognition and menopause to MCI and AD. It's going to take 10 to 20 years. And when you do those correlations, you shouldn't be looking at whole brain and dementia because that's not even what we're talking about. That's not what these menopausal women have. You've got to do the right outcome measures, the clinical and MRI ones, and you got to track those for 20 years. Even then, when you find out that this does increase your, if it does, it may not, I hope it doesn't. But if it does, especially in a certain subgroup that have genetic risk probably, or not maybe, I don't know. Well, it's data, I don't know. That's the beauty of it. You do the experiment and see what happens. You don't preset it. You're not married to an idea. You just do the experiment, right? Do the experiment.
Yeah.
We'll get the answer. But the point is very doable. And the UK is doing it. But I'm just telling you, even if they find, I'm going to be a real stickler for causality, what causes something. So even if they find that having more severe menopause brain fog people scored, quantified, that leads to an increased incidence 10 years later of MCI, which leads to an increased incidence of AD. Even when they find that, you know what I'll say? You haven't proven that this causes it. You've shown that having this is correlated statistically with getting it later is more likely, but you actually didn't prove this. Because you know what? The only way you can prove something as a scientist, you have to go in and you have to do an intervention. You have to change something. And in the lab, we change the gene. We knock out a gene, E or beta, estrogen receptor beta in the brain in this cell or that cell, or we treat with this or that. We do things. Or you can, so it's either a genetic intervention, which is can't do it in people yet. We will someday, not yet. Or a pharmacologic intervention that changes that gene through a drug, and you can do that in people, of course. So the only way you can establish causality, even if menopause brain fog does, and I don't know this, we won't know for 10 or 20 years, but even if it does lead to an increased incidence, we won't know that it caused it. Right. It could have been all those women that were doing this. They also take something else, right? And that caused. So the only way you can do it is you have to have an intervention. And you have to ask, were the people that had the intervention getting less MCI or whatever? And you know what the problem is? It's a catch-22 because there's no intervention. Until ours with Cleopatra RX and Pearl Pack has come along, there is no FDA-approved treatment and ours isn't FDA-approved yet either because we're a compounded drug and it's cheap and that's another story. But until there's a treatment, an intervention proven to affect cognitive brain fog in women, and you show that when you treat, it decreases that. That's an intervention and it causes a change. It's an intervention and change. It's cause and effect. And the problem is now, even when we do all these studies longitudinal, we're still not going to know whether it's causal. The only way to get it causal is to develop an intervention. And that's what Cleopatra RX is doing. We're developing an intervention for these women to see if it does or does not decrease those things. See what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of what you're explaining and talking about, it takes me straight to this place of, okay, inflammation is not good.
That's true. Inflammation and neurodegeneration are linked. There can be some rare, odd, I know too much about this, but some good inflammation, I guess. But by and large, inflammation is not good, by and large.
And what is it? What are the things that you think we do every day that increases the likelihood of that?
Well, I'll do the flip side of the question, and that is, what do we do not what we do that's bad,
Yeah.
but what can we do that's good?
Yes. What can we do that's going to help what's going to help us get less inflammation in our brains?
Right. So I don't want to be as specific as inflammation. I want to keep it as inflammation and neurodegeneration because they're linked. So let's just keep it as what can we do that's good for our brains because they're so linked. So what can we do in our lives that will be good for our brains other than to take, Pearl Pack or Cleopatra X, or some people can't take it because they've had a history of, they've had breast cancer, so they're not going to get it. I can just tell you that. I don't care about receptors. They're never going to get it if they've had breast cancer. I wouldn't do it, but anyway, so there are people who can't take estrogen at all, even estriol. They shouldn't take it. They've had breast cancer. They've had a heart attack. They've had blood clots. I'm not going to give estriol to somebody like that. That's just not going to happen. It's a contraindication. It's a cold stop. So you have people like that. What can they do? Is there anything they can do? And I would say yes. I would say it's not been proven the way that this basic science that I've done has been shown with all the receptors and how does it work and the whole 9 yards. Done clinical trials in another disease and repurpose it over like MS to aging. But I will say there is enough evidence to convince me that I think that exercise is very good for the brain. There's a lot of reasons. The main ones would be there's a substance called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's made by the brain. It can be made by muscles and go to the brain, and it's good for the brain. So if we exercise, physical exercise is good. The other thing about physical exercise is it can help the cardiovascular system, so you get better blood circulation. So it's kind of like indirect versus direct to the cardiovascular, and then other things that are just good for the brain. So, and then what exercise are we talking about? Well, really, it's good to do about 30 minutes of get your heart rate up 3 times a week. That's an easy thing. 30 minutes 3 times a week. And I don't mean just going for easy walking and talking the whole time like we like to do, but we got to push ourselves. Get that radio going. You got not radio. There you go. I think I'm like 100 years old here, but no. Get my iPods with my whatever.
Your AirPods with your iPods.
AirPods with my AirPods.
iPod is not even a thing anymore.
There we go. I got to quit talking about this stuff. Look at myself like really, really. This like take some Pearl Pack, right? So, but I don't know. No, I am geared up because I actually like to run and I jog till it's hard because you got to do that for your heart and for your brain to get these substances and these good things going. The other thing we've talked about a lot with Cleopatra RX is to design a game. We haven't done this yet, but we've talked about designing a game and an app so that you can have cognitive exercise. I will tell you that field is very complicated about which exercise will be beneficial and how long and how much for exercise cognitive training. I think it'll be done. It's going to be just a matter of time before they identify. Again, because random cognitive exercise, I'm not so sure. It's not like these women have much problem with math. They have verbal memory. So the exercise, you need to match the problem when you design the exercise. And that's not what I do. I'm not a neuropsychologist. I don't do formal cognitive testing. I do, genes, MRIs, drugs. that's what I do. I'm a neurologist and neuroscience, but I don't do cognitive training. I don't do app development, but that's something that we're interested in. And I do believe, and it doesn't matter. This is not true. This is something I believe, or I hypothesize that it is best to do. I think you need the hormone because I don't think you can exercise and cognitive train your way out of this. It's too hard. It's not fair to people to expect them to do that. It's impossible. So they need a little help. They need the hormone they've lost, hopefully in a good form like Pearl Pack with Cleopatra RX. But in addition, I think it is a good idea to do that exercise, 30 minutes 3 times a week, get your heart rate up. And I actually think it is a good idea to do some sort of cognitive exercise that you can think of that hits those areas that are weak. I'm not an expert on that, to be honest. And the reason I'll tell you why I say that, because this is kind of another big picture thing. If you think about men that want to have muscles, this is something real obvious. We can see them. This is like the brain and the MRIs and everything. Think about men trying to do bodybuilding. Okay. So when they take testosterone, it helps. They get bigger muscles. Muscle mass does increase. That's a fact. When they exercise and lift weights, their muscle mass is increased. That's true. What happens when they do both? It's bigger than ever. It's synergistic. It's additive, right? So I think the same thing goes on with the estriol, the Pearl Pack in the brain. I think when you take it, it's good for your brain. But if you can supplement that with cognitive exercises and some physical exercises that we know will help the brain, I think these things are good. You could just do the cognitive exercises, just the physical exercises, and not take a drug. I think that's a tall order to do that. it's helpful, but they're just good to do both if we can. Some of us can't do both, and so they can only do one, and that's what we have.
Yeah, it's tough because I've had a lot of people send emails, women specifically that have had cancer before, and it's tough, especially. But I like what you're saying. I mean, look, there's a reason why they can't take. I mean, some might. I don't know. I don't know.
They can't. No, they can't.
Because it's contraindicated, right?
Yes, they can't. And furthermore, they're in a terrible spot because they have breast cancer. Many of them do take tamoxifen, which blocks estrogen receptor alpha. But and if it did anything good, and the other thing it does is they take these aromatase inhibitors, which not only have they had their ovaries removed so they don't make estrogen, they take something that even if the adrenal makes a precursor that could be converted to estrogen. They're so worried about estradiol binding the breast alpha receptors, they make sure these women have no estrogen. I mean, zero of any type or kind. And what do they get? They get cognitive problems. And can they take anything for it? Absolutely not. So I feel real bad. I mean, when I see them, it really, they just can exercise. They can do cognitive training. They should not take an estrogen. And I wouldn't even give them the Pearl Pack with Cleopatra RX either. I mean, that's why I have patents. UCLA has them. I'm the inventor. That's what I always do is I work for UCLA, but that's why we're coming up with really novel ER beta ligands that don't bind the alpha receptor at all. That might be something that someday they would have, but that's just such early stages in the mouse.
That's, I guess, the other question is like, are scientists, are doctors doing the research to help women in that position?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. We will see grants. I mean, I review grants too for NIH, and we'll see a lot of grants coming through about exercise. And you can do exercise in people, you can do exercise in mice, and you can see what are the effects on brain and other things in MS models, in Alzheimer's models, in aging models. It's being done. Is it being done in menopause specifically? You know what I'm saying? No. The answer is no. I don't think I've ever seen a grant. Well, I don't see all the grants. I'm just one grant reviewer, so I shouldn't say it doesn't happen. But I'm not seeing papers where exercise has been shown to help cognitive issues with menopause. That's a really good idea. That should be done.
Yeah, somebody should do that.
We should collaborate with someone.
Yes.
No, I would love to do that.
I would too.
I would love to do that. See, I think the perfect trial to do is they take Pearl Pack is one arm. Another arm takes Pearl Pack and exercises. Another arm exercises only. And another arm does nothing. 4 arms. And so you've got this beautiful synergistic arm where they do both. That's your positive. You got this really bad arm where they get neither, and that sucks, but that's a trial, and they'll only do this for a while. We have to inform them, and after the trial's over, we can tell them what happened, and that they'll know more about themselves. And there's a reason to enroll into trials. We learn, but they need to be really prospectively randomized to having, Pearl Pack or not, and exercise or not. And it's hard to, and they have to be blinded. So it's hard to blind people. They don't know they're exercising. So the exercise grants that I've read, they do some sort of a placebo exercise, but they kind of know the difference. I mean, they know what they're doing. They know this is probably not the rigorous stuff so it's hard to do those studies, if you know what I'm saying. It's just hard. Yes. Because there's no placebo control for the exercise. We can do a placebo control for the estriol, so we can do a good study.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing research on is the sort of disparity between, women of color and how they're, the sort of rates of how they're disproportionately misdiagnosed, especially when it comes to menopause. I mean, this is just like with the diagnosis itself. So yeah, I think that the science, it needs to, we need to do more. We need to do more testing. We need to do more research. And I just really hope that I am hopeful. I am too. Yeah.
Because
and I'm excited.
We're talking about it and we're doing, things are happening. We're starting.
Yeah.
We now have a treatment that this isn't a trial, what I'm doing with Cleopatra RX and Pearl Pack. No. What this is, it's like, what I do with the UCLA Comprehensive Menopause Program. I'm the neurologist. I see them. I decide should they or should they not get estrogen at all. If they do, what should it be? Should it be? They don't care about. It's not a brain issue that much. Just do the hot flashes for a few. We decide that. So it's basically tailored to them, and also the dose timing that they need. And Cleopatra's not doing that. We're treating on patient care, best clinical care for that person. It's not randomized. Nobody gets a placebo. This is not a trial. It's basically treating and optimizing for their care. But those trials do need to be done to answer a lot of these questions like you're asking. I would love to do those trials.
Yeah, same.
And I will say one thing about the people of color. I did speak with Mayor Bass and she's very supportive because she knows a lot. Actually, she's got a degree in some health sciences. She does. I didn't know that either. And the head of the Urban League, Cynthia Mitchell Hurd. So these were African American women, and they were interested in supporting the things Cleopatra RX is doing because they said they see it in their community where, and I've read a few papers, but not a lot's been done, but a little bit. And what it says is that African American women, you talked about the diagnosis being more difficult. That's because some providers don't listen to them. So we need more people like them as doctors is the solution from talking to other people. Not my area, but that's what I've heard the solution is. But the other thing that I find really interesting based on the science is that there's some evidence that African American women are more likely to get breast cancer and more likely to get dementia. And I'm like, well, now they're really caught. They're more likely to get the bad things, and they have no treatment. So they can't try to protect their brain because they're more likely to get breast cancer. My goodness, they're stuck. And, a lot of them are the major, they really have a lot of respect for the African-American women who are the grandmothers. They're integrated. They take care of the children, the grandchildren, the mothers are working. They're big in these families. They're very important for society. And so to have them in such a bind where they're more likely to get, if they were more likely to get dementia, and we don't know if it's cardiovascular or Alzheimer's. It's not even been studied enough. It needs to be studied. That's all I can say, because you can make an argument that their risk-benefit ratio could be a little different, or there's treatments that should be designed for them specifically. I don't know. It's a really big problem.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, even as you're saying that culturally, like my grandmother suffered from dementia, and she was the main caretaker, and she never took any...
Yeah.
Her brain decline went really quickly. Yeah. And, those are the things that I think about now, especially I'm the only one in my family that went into early menopause.
Yeah. Well, you can't be estrogen deficient for you'd be half your life instead of a third.
Right.
It's a problem.
Yeah. Big problem.
It is. And I'll say one thing too for women, even the women, for society in general and women, how bad this is to not have any treatment that targets the brain in menopause. This is a problem for society in general. In my opinion, a big one, because the people that I'm seeing are women who are, they're usually 50 to 60, 65. And I see them, and these are the women who've worked so hard all of their lives, doing all kinds of, the lower level jobs, when it comes, and finally, they're 50 and they get to, just like, you get to this point in your life where now you can have, you can be the head of it. You can be running it. You're the supervisor. You're the CEO. You're the head lawyer. You're not just the lowest partner. You're the head lawyer. And guess what? You can't remember your words. You're in a meeting and you got to ask somebody, oh, what were we talking? And you know what that does in a competitive work environment? So women trying to break the glass ceiling of these things and get us in high level jobs, not just part of the lab, but running the lab. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever it is. They can't lose. They've got to be at maximum 100% brain capacity when they're 50, 55, 60, 65. That's when they're going to be able to make a change and do something for other women, for the next generation. And we've got to have a treatment to help their brain, targeting their brain. We can't ignore it anymore. The women's brains are so important at this age, just for the progression of the independence and level of women in society at large. They can't go to 50 and cap out. What kind of guys? I mean, the men too, they all become very successful. 50, 55, 60, 65, even when they're, because testosterone drops really, 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 really slow. They don't lose it real fast at 50. They have brain issues too, but it's a slow. It's 1% to 2% per year from the age of 30 to 70. They lose testosterone, and that's bad for their brain, but it's so slow. So we can't let this happen to women. We have to have this treatment we have to have menopausal care that targets the brain in menopause, teach about it, put it in menopause comprehensive centers, develop treatments for it like what we're doing with Cleopatra RX.
Dr. Rhonda, thank you so much. First, thank you for all the work that you're doing. You're a hero and you need to be celebrated. So thank you.
That's so kind. Thank you.
I mean, it's true. I mean, our lives depend on this research, and I couldn't be yelling it from the mountaintops any more than I do, but I just so appreciate you taking the time to come out here and to share all your incredible knowledge with us and what you're doing with treatment. You're actually providing solutions for us. So where can we go to connect with you or to get more information on Cleopatra RX?
You can go to cleopatrarx.com, go to the website. If you live in LA, you can see me in the Department of Neurology, UCLA Comprehensive Menopause Program, but we're statewide with cleopatrarx.com. And I want to thank you because it takes women in positions of, labs, clinics, but also politics, media. We've got to help each other at this level to all push this forward. And it's not just the scientists and the doctors, it's people like you, actually. So thank you for having me on and getting the word out there. We're in this together, right?
We are.
We each have different roles and we're a team.
Yeah, we are a team. We're Synapses.
We are, and we are connected.
You're connected. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. All the links Dr. Rhonda mentioned will be in the show notes, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, please let us know what you thought. Or if you have any questions for Dr. Rhonda, we will get them to her. Thank you again so much for being here. Send this to your friends, to your moms, your sisters, your people, all the women in your life. 100% of women will be affected by this at one point or another. So please help us by sharing this. Thank you so much.